Hey, autoimmune warriors, welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. I am so fired up for you to be here. If you're navigating life with an autoimmune condition, you're in the right place. I am your host, Des, and I am not just a podcaster. I am right here in the trenches with you as a fellow autoimmune warrior. We're diving into real, uplifting stories and some seriously smart expert tips and simple lifestyle tweaks that can make a difference in how we feel day to day. Now, I've got to give a huge shout out to my amazing listeners. You're the heartbeat of this podcast, and I'm so grateful for you tuning in. If you're loving the vibes, here is how you can keep the love flowing. Drop a rating on Spotify, share a quick review on Apple, or pass this episode along to a warrior buddy who can use a boost of hope. Here are some nations that are killing it for our community. Workers with Autoimmune Ailments Alliance. These folks are fighting the good fight for students and workers like us with autoimmune conditions. Want to get involved or learn more? Swing by WAAA.org. They'll love to have you. Leap Cure. They're all about hooking up patients with cutting-edge clinical trials and putting our voices front and center. Check them out at leapcure.com. Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. They offer nutrient-packed supplements based on science. Snag 20% off your first order with my code DEZ, D-E-Z, at Adapt Naturals. From my heart to yours, I'm sending you nothing but love and good vibes. Let's dive in together. All right. Thank you so much, April, and listeners to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. I have April Chavez here. She is a lupus warrior. She turned her lupus diagnosis into a holistic wellness journey, from law enforcement to hosting the Wellness Driven Life show and managing Driven Livin LLC. She explores lifestyle impacts on well-being, and she enjoys life with her husband and her children. And Manlee? Is
Yes.
that, yeah.
He's my manly man.
I was like, is that her husband's name?
Yeah.
All right. Never heard of that name. Well, thank you so much. I really want to dig into how your diagnosis got started. From my understanding, you've had probably lupus since you were a baby.
Mm-hmm. I've had symptoms since birth, wasn't diagnosed. Desiree, I just want to start by saying thank you so much for having me on your incredible podcast. This is great for people. You know, it's so important, vitally important that we share our journeys with each other so we don't feel so alone, so we can learn tips and tricks on how to best manage any situation that we may have. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. So I've had symptoms of a disease since birth. It wasn't quite normal as far as, skin. So skin rashes and just kind of not the happiest baby ever, right? Which not all babies are always happy. But there was always signs that came along, and I was really, really sick when I was about between 8 and 10. And so they thought I had leukemia at the time, had bone marrow transplants, and they still never found anything. But at the age of 15 was when I was finally diagnosed. And to be honest, it was a relief at that time period because there had been so many years of trials and tribulations of not knowing exactly what it was. So yeah, that's kind of where the stem of it all came.
Yeah. I have a question. So I haven't researched this, but how do you get symptoms as a baby? I mean, is it something that your mother had, or what do you know about having lupus at such a young age?
Yeah. Statistically, it's not common. It's pretty rare. Although now, as many of us know, autoimmune diseases are at skyrocketing rates and they just continue to rise and grow. But at the time, it wasn't common. In fact, statistically, it was more in African American women in the age range of 30 and above.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very awkward as a child going into like a support group for lupus specifically and being the only kid there, being the only. So it was very awkward. But I have my theories and we'll never really know, right? But we all know that we have these genes that can be turned on and turned off, and we carry so many of them. So I just happen to have the lupus gene, and it happened to be turned on early on. I believe that it was in the womb because my parents were wheat farmers. So when we think
Mm.
about chemicals and all the things that have an effect on us that we put on in around our bodies, the skin is the largest organ, so it sucks up everything, all those toxic chemicals. So when they were spraying the fields and working the farm, all of those toxic chemicals were being internalized by mom, which I that's my theory right now.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't matter, except that we have an understanding that all of those things can really play a huge role on turning those genes on or off.
So I live in San Antonio, and a lot of the fields, you have a lot of farm fields, Brownsville,
Yep.
around the area, and there are a lot of farmers. And I've worked with hospitals and interviewing and talking to people in the pediatric hospitals here in San Antonio. But I just want to address this part, that these pesticides are horrible. And I urge people to try to eat organic, just because when we buy organic, when we eat organic, it makes demands for farmers to not be exposed to these chemicals, and makes it a safer environment for not only us, but for the earth. But these nurses that I spoke to in these hospitals, babies were coming out with no brain. Babies were coming out with no
My gosh.
limbs. So the fact that you were born and you have all this, I mean, you have lupus, obviously that's horrible. I'm sorry. But I want to address just that. That's my little spiel for today.
Desiree, you make so many great points when it comes to all of those things, the pesticides. And really, it's nobody's fault if they're unaware, but once we become aware, it's our choice and decisions that can really help make a bigger impact, right? I like to call it voting with your dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you purchase products that don't include that, that are organic, and it's voting with your dollar. You're telling the world and the farmers around that that's what you want and that's what you are going to buy. And so it's the demand that it creates.
Right.
And sometimes it's not available. So if you're living in the Midwest, this is slower to catch on, right? Where they have offers for organic produce. And in that case, just buy what you can that is available. And again, that's voting with your dollar. So the store will eventually start getting more of that in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate that we've gone through that phase and doing this to our bodies and the earth and to each other. But like you said, we do now have a voice, and it's with that money.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes for people, right? But back to your journey, and I'm wondering what the turning point was, because you got diagnosed at 15. So what was the turning point in transforming your life into more holistic and wellness?
Really, when I had my children. And I had my children at a very young age, because when I was diagnosed at 15, and I think it was at 18, I was told that I would never have children by my
That's so sad.
rheumatologist. Well, yes, and as a sexually active 18-year-old, I was like, why am I taking birth control? And so I stopped taking the birth control. I became pregnant, and I left it alone because I assumed I would miscarry, and I didn't. And so here's the course change of my life, where now I have this human being to care for. And knowing what I knew and dealing with what I have dealt with an autoimmune disease, I wanted her to live the best that she could. Not only that, but I had a good friend growing up, and her mother had MS. multiple sclerosis. And I watched her mom dwindle down and eventually die, but I saw the impact on the children. And I never wanted that to happen. I never wanted to be that for my kids. And so not only did I want my kids to be really healthy, but I wanted to be healthy too. And so that's the point where I really started researching deep on foods and products and reading labels and just taking in as much information and research as possible. So that was a long time ago. There were things that I was noticing as a younger kid and a teenager, but it wasn't something that I really put all together. My mom had always said, you need to keep a food diary. So she sort of put the idea in my head that maybe it has something to do with what I'm eating. The strangest things, like I'd get these debilitating migraine headaches and I'd be so sick. And I discovered that it was when I ate sausage. And
Mm.
so it's strange little things like that. So it did, it was on the forefront of awareness then, but as a kid, I just wanted to be a kid. And I think that was completely to my advantage, with having an autoimmune disease for my whole life. I didn't want it to define me just because I wanted to be like everyone else. And so I didn't allow it to consume me, if that makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely when I had the girls, I have 3 daughters now. They're all beautiful, healthy,
Congratulations.
grown. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I oftentimes call my miracle daughters, just really just based on that diagnosis. And they just knew so little. They told my mom I wouldn't make it to C30. I'm 40. So we've surpassed that. I've done a lot of things in life. I'm stepping into law enforcement. I mean, really pushing myself physically because I never wanted that disease to define me. I wanted to show the world and myself that I was greater than, I was stronger than, that I wasn't sickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a testimony that you can really have a chronic illness and learn how to have a big, or how do you put it, driven live in life.
Yep. That's
S-
it.
I'm really curious about your law enforcement. What came first? Was it more your spiritual, intellectual, physical that
Mm,
helped go into law enforcement, or did you go into law enforcement because you just was,
mm.
how did that work out for you?
Desiree, that has so many different facets. So I'm going to touch just briefly on all of them. In high school, I was amongst the friends that was never having children. Because not only did I think that I couldn't, but I just literally did not. I didn't want to be the family person. All my girlfriends were like, oh, yeah, I'm having this huge family, making plans. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm going to school and I wanted to become a forensic entomologist, which is
Mm.
the study and life cycle of insects, being able to tell the time of death on a corpse, etc. So I was fascinated by all that. I was fascinated by life cycle. And when you've nearly met death already so many times, it's kind of like you start to embrace it a little bit. It's like, well, it can happen or it can't happen. It's just the cycle of life, right? So when I had the kids, I chose not to go into that field because it would have been 8 to 10 years of schooling, and I didn't want to try to maintain that with 3 kiddos. So I chose to go into law enforcement because I figured that if I maybe get some background with the criminal justice and with detective work, then maybe if I choose to later on, I can go back to school and go deeper into that forensic aspect. But I already have, a definite aspect of the field that I could utilize for that transition. And there's a lot of other things too. My favorite superhero as a kid was She-Ra. We named our yeah, which for those of you who don't know, I'm sorry, and look her up.
You need to, yeah, definitely look that up.
It dates me, I guess, but if most people know He-Man, I mean, he's a little more popular, but She-Ra is He-Man's twin sister, and she is the most powerful princess in the universe. And I wanted to be that. And so going into law enforcement was that piece of me, that childhood piece that I got to go and save the day, right? And having an autoimmune disease, I'm like, I get to show that I'm stronger and I'm capable and I can do this. The military wouldn't take me because they had access to health records, but law enforcement didn't. So
Mm.
I was able to push myself beyond many limits, go into a male dominating field and enter in that position. I also was in Colorado. So I grew up during the Columbine school shooting age. And that had a really big impact on decision making of how I wanted to show up and help serve society in that regard as well.
Yeah. What, as you tell me this, I can really feel that this strength is coming from within. It's always been part of you. So, can you tell
Mm.
me where you got that from? Was it your mom, your upbringing, or I mean, not many people can say those things, or Shira is
Mm.
their role, not
Yeah.
role model, but they want to be her.
You really develop a lot of strength going through hardships at a young age. Being the kid who had to be pulled out of school once a week to go get blood work drawn or whatever, and not being able to play sports. I loved doing sports. I had to be pulled out of sports because my body just couldn't handle it. I'd get bruised too easily and, or I'd get nosebleeds or whatever. And it wasn't possible for me to continue that. And so I think that when you have all of these difficult time periods, it strengthens a person, of course, or it'll break you down. But it strengthened me in a lot of capacities. And my mom is super amazing. She's worked in the healthcare field my whole life. She finally just retired. I've been kind of waiting because she's always served everyone else. And she was a single mom raising me and my brother growing up. And so I saw firsthand what it was to be a dedicated, proud, hard worker. My mom was very, very prideful. So she refused to go accept food stamps from the state. She wouldn't accept anything like that. She grew up during a generation that just wasn't something that you wanted to do. And so she worked very, very hard to stay out of that and not go into that. But it certainly wasn't easy. There was
Hmm.
a lot of trips to the grocery store on foot. And there was a lot of embarrassing moments because we struggled having that. But she showed me a lot of strength also.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful to have your hero right there in front of you.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the past, before you changed how you ate and started turning your life around, that you would get a lot of bruises because you enjoyed playing sports. So you're in law enforcement. How were you able to keep up with the boys, or in that
Yeah.
man dominated field?
That's a great question. My disease has been ebb and flow throughout life. And I think I just got really lucky during those years where I didn't have a flare up. But going deeper into this interview, we can share how I really started seeing the times that I'd have a flare up and not. So that starts moving into the more spiritual aspect, so to speak, or just that it was always internal. And so all of the things that were difficult time periods of my life or traumatizing periods during my life, it wasn't much long after that I'd experienced this massive flare up and end up
Yeah.
hospitalized or what have you. And about 6 months later, roughly, was common for me.
Oh, wow.
So it's just that I started noticing those patterns. And when I realized that, that's when I started researching more of the internal factors of our making and our thought patterns. And what we internalize becomes a reality.
And you said you did a lot of research into that portion. I'm all about mindset and movement and finding your inner strengths. So, what research did you do? Is it mindset, meditation? Tell me about
Mm,
that, how you
yeah.
started digging into that. What research did you do?
Yeah. My favorite research to date is Dr. Joe Dispenza, his
Mhm.
work. And so I had probably the biggest hit of life not too long ago, actually. And I hadn't really gone into deeper meditations. I hadn't made that a practice in life. I had known about it a little bit, but I hadn't really practiced or embraced. In fact, I had read so much work on it, but again, wasn't doing any practices. So when I had this life trauma happen, I decided that I was going to start going within. And that's the hard thing to do, right? Nobody wants to do that. And if everybody were doing it, then the world would be a totally different place, wouldn't it? So it's doing the work, doing the hard work, that and being persistent and patient with that. It takes time, and it has to be consistent and continuing. It doesn't just stop, right? Like, I continue to do the work. But I remember being so excited because I had purchased a ticket to go to one of his weekend intensives, and I'm like, I'm going to learn how to meditate. So I was just really excited about that. But once you are there, like, you go in having this understanding, and you come out with a knowing, like this deeply rooted understanding and knowing how powerful we truly are.
I think that's beautiful. I'm been reading his books and listening to his books, and this is, you're right. And I'm at this one part of the book. He's like, okay, you do this for 1 week, and don't skip ahead. Do the work, and then do the work at least for 1 week. And once you get that mastered, and you feel like you really mastered it, go to the next thing. Don't you know? And I'm just like, people want to just like when you get sick, you want that magic pill, you want that instant thing to help you, but life isn't like that. I remember having that conversation. I like to exercise, and I said, you don't exercise. I mean, I do. You don't exercise because you like it. Usually you exercise. Usually the start is always so hard, but then you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh, this feels good. And then afterwards, you definitely get the gratification. And then if you do
Mm-hmm.
it consistently, you definitely feel that, like, I'm starting to, you get all the results, and it just compiles. And I think us as just humans, we're just so used to, like, why can't it just be immediate? Absolutely. So after it sounded like something really triggered you, that trauma, like you were talking about. And you don't have to tell us what it is unless you want to. But after you had this experience when did Joe Dispenza, what changed in your life after that?
Everything changed. Everything changed. Well, I have a business. I mean, I stepped into entrepreneurship prior to that, but my business really started flourishing. It was as if I was stepping into my purpose
Mhm.
and really doing it and showing up in the world as myself. I think that's the beautiful thing about it. The important thing about it is not only doing that work will it heal you physically, it heals you on all levels. It aligns you spiritually in order to really be the you that's supposed to be here. You start shining so brightly, and people will fall out of your life because they're like, who are you? Like, you're a totally new you because you're actually you. And we all put on this forefront, this mask
Mhm.
in life, in whatever hat we're wearing at the time, right? Whether it's brother, mother, sister, worker, mother, daughter, whatever. And you're just really just being authentically you when you start going within, because you beginning to connect with you, and you're connecting with source. So everything changes,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful. People are afraid of change. It is a terrifying thing because we as humans are so used and familiar to the day in and day out, the mundane. And that was one of the biggest things that I saw working as a deputy sheriff, is that so many of the cases were domestic violence cases, and you'd give them all of these resources to have an out and make a different choice and change their life and their circumstances, and they wouldn't take it. And I'm like, what is going on? I came here to do this position because I wanted to help make a difference. And yes, you're saving lives, and I've done that. And that is a big thing. I don't want to dwindle that in any regard. First responders are needed, and they're incredible. And it's a worthy position. And I wanted to make a bigger impact. And
Mhm.
so what I do now, I feel, we channel the show for a global audience, just like you're doing, Desiree, and you're sharing information, and people can take it or they leave it. But at least you're giving them, you know, information that they can choose to utilize or not.
Yeah. So talk about your entrepreneurship. You have a channel, you
Yeah.
work with the wellness driven show.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk about what you talk on the show, what you do on the show. What is it all about?
As a show, wellness driven life show. So it's a lot of it's in the title, right? But we actually interview guests from all across the board. And I did that intentionally. I didn't go into the specific niche, which I was advised to by so many people. If there's entrepreneurs listening to this, you get that, right? Because there's always people out there that are like, this is the advice. This is what you need to do. You got to do that. Or else, you're never going to show up in the sea of whatever. And so I really have gone against the grain in many facets with my business. And not that I don't learn from what others have done and guided, I do all the time, but there's also that piece of you that if you go within and you just listen to your instinct and you feel that you're supposed to go a certain direction, then you stand by that too, because you've got to listen to yourself. You know and have all the answers within you. And so you have to have faith in that and listen to yourself. So the show is interviewing people primarily, let's just say they all have a common theme of resiliency, and love to go into the stories of how and why, what the story was behind the passion that they're doing today, that they're creating in the world right now. And so it's sharing that and having my audience be able to see their faces and be so impacted by the emotions on their face and that story that they feel inspired to create their own driven life. And as far as Driven Livin, which is my main business, it's an educational platform. So we have self-improvement programs and we have communities. And so the show is just kind of like this lovely piece that comes alongside it. And it's that entrance into here we are, and this is what we offer, and this is how we educate.
And with this Driven Livin, the program that you do, I know you do the coaching, but you do one-on-one coaching as a group, or how do you educate? I mean, is it only for people that have autoimmune disease since you had autoimmune disease, or is it all accepting? It sounds like it's all accepting. You want everybody just, to understand.
It's if you got skin, if you are living on this planet and you are a life breathing, it's funny that you say that, Desiree, because no, it's not geared towards autoimmune. And talking about, going into a specific niche, I never wanted to go that direction. And it
Because you
probably
never
stems
felt,
back to,
like you said, you never felt aligned with that.
I didn't want it to define me. I
Yeah.
didn't want to, I was always like, nope, don't accept it. Don't accept it. And, are there parts of that we need to pay attention to? Yes. And I think there's a lot of power behind that too. I'm very fortunate. I mean, I still have lupus markers, so it hasn't gone away or anything, but I'm also extraordinarily blessed because it's not taking me down. I'm not bedridden. I'm able to show up here with you today, and I'm able to do so many different things. And I feel like I have so much to offer. And what is that other than service? And service is one of those things that when we start doing that, the reciprocity of that is really one of the best things that we can do for ourselves and anyone else. So there's one-on-one coaching, but a lot of that actually goes into hypnotherapy because I'm a certified hypnotherapist. So that's going into that subconscious mind, right? And really changing the inner dialogue and creating new habits. So instead of systematically doing the same things we do over and over, we're changing that and we're starting to create new habits. Yes, there's that. But the biggest thing is that we have the community. And so there's a lot of resources within the community. It's private, it's free. And then we have other communities outside of that. And we have the programs which offer more in-depth aspects into the spiritual, intellectual, and physical well-being.
Yeah. And talk more of that, the trifecta of that. I know you,
Yeah.
Hypnotherapist, Joe Dispenza's big influence on you, or
Yes.
had a big influence on you. Tell me how that integrates into the program or has influenced you.
Hugely. I could say there's there's a lot of influences, and I've interviewed almost over 300 people. And so kind of taking in all of that, and you'll know that as an interviewer, you are gaining so much knowledge. And for those of you listening in, it's just an incredible opportune time in history where we get to just soak all of this in, and all of these beautiful concepts and ideas and wisdom from so many people. And so it's a collaboration of all of those things and all of those influences coming into one. But SIP, spiritual, intellectual, physical, there's a lot of reasons why I loved that. Basically, it's mind, body, spirit. That's what you'll hear more commonly. Spiritual, intellectual, physical is SIP, life slowly, because when you start moving slower and start being present, that impacts your life greatly. And that's being present is the greatest gift you can give to anyone. And it's a self-improvement program. So there's just a lot of cool play on words and why we chose to go that direction. But it all stems down into that when you find harmony in all of those different buckets and you start to see big changes within life. I mean, the only constant is change itself, right? So you're going to see something different happen when you start to tune in to some of those different frequencies of each of those dimensions.
Yeah. You mentioned you're a hypnotherapist, but I was wondering and this is your new business, now that you're, I guess, awake, you're tuned in to a new frequency. But I was wondering, what did you take from your past life, maybe your law enforcement or when you were younger, to applying it to this program?
Oh my gosh, everything, and turning it into wisdom. I feel that when we start to look at our past and our past difficulties and traumas and tribulations, when we turn it into something that was a wonderful experience for us, because we learned from it and because we turned it into wisdom. I mean, you're so grateful for that, right? You can be grateful for everything that has ever happened, and nothing was ever a mistake or wrong. You didn't go in the wrong direction. We're never on the wrong path. And you can be grateful for that because you wouldn't be right here, right now, as you are right here, right now. And yeah, but all of those things were incredible. I mean, the safety aspect, being more observant of myself and my surroundings just by default of the training, learning breath work when you're in law enforcement. I mean, that's vital to you because you're in
I
these.
never knew that they
Well,
give.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you're in a really high intense situation and you're holding somebody at gunpoint, if you can't calm yourself down enough, then all of your blood is flowing to your hands, and then you can't move and you can't function, and then you're useless.
Yeah, the
And
fight,
then
flight, or
somebody,
freeze or something. Yeah.
yeah. So those sort of things were so good for me to understand and know. And so when you start growing and learning more and wanting to improve yourself, you start taking all the little things that you learned in the past and you're like, oh yeah, so this fits in this way. And the puzzle starts coming together and you can remember the things that you've learned and apply them and connect the dots, right? And that's part of how the brain works. It's always seeking things to connect to. And so it makes everything a little more sticky when you're able to do that.
Well, it's so beautiful that not everybody sees their life as magical like that. And that's part of that mindset and part of like tuning in. Like everything was
Yeah.
meant for a reason. Like the serendipity. Like people see, as not everybody, but people, you can see life so humdrum. Like, I got to go to work today. I got to do. And then if you tweak it, like you're mentioning, and see life so magical and things are meant to happen a certain way, then everything's just, you see almost life differently. Like a kid, like you believe in magical unicorns and why not?
Yeah.
Everything changes and you are excited to wake up in the morning.
Yeah. Well, your brain starts seeking the evidence of more magic and excitement. And Desiree, I would venture to say that most of us have trouble being able to say that their life was magical and great. That's where the work comes in, right? Because I still have to consistently work on myself and to change the thoughts, because the automatic programming is to go back to that trauma and to feel the feelings and the emotions of what I experienced during that time, because I embodied that. And so my body wants to respond to that. My body wants to shrink down and be scared and, curl up and not be confident, because it's just doing what it was designed to do. But when you know that the body's designed to do that, you're like, okay, I get that. And I want it to do this. And then you sit up a little taller and you're like, I'm going to redirect that thought. And the more and more that you continue to do that, the more that your body will begin to respond that way. And eventually it will catch on. And then you get to wake up excited and you get to just be more joyful and be able to turn those thoughts off a lot quicker, because they will come.
Yeah.
Because we're designed to be that way.
So based on that, I mean, I know it's hard to get out of that mode, right? You're in that. So what is your motivation, your inspiration when you have challenging days?
It's that passion that, I seemingly have found. The passion to be my purpose, who I believe that I came here to be for the world. And it's within that purpose drive that pushes me forward. And also, for me, it's just switching and turning things. Like with small children, you have to redirect the attention, right? If they're doing something as a parent, you're like, okay, that's not a good environment. Let's redirect the attention. Let's go do this. And it works really well with kids, right? But we too, as adults, have to do that with ourselves and just redirect the attention, whether that's through writing, whether that's through stepping outdoors and going for a walk. Both of those things are really powerful for me. If I don't get outdoor activity every single day, it has a huge impact on me. And so I also have writing habits that I do each morning that really help redirect whatever thoughts or feelings that trigger me, so to speak. And then when you're doing those reflections, it's just that reaffirmation. You're reaffirming yourself to remember and show up differently and respond differently next time.
It's beautiful that you have these practices put in place so you can stay focused, because like you said, it's so easy to go back into those old habits, the old way of thinking.
Yeah.
What would you like to share with somebody that's newly diagnosed with autoimmune disease? Anything special?
Yeah, of course. Well, for everybody, it shows up differently. Your past traumas are yours. But I strongly believe that all of those things that continue to come up is what creates the dis-ease. And so by knowing that and by doing the work of going within, tuning into your body, getting quiet, slowing down, you'll start to hear and listen to what are those things that are bringing up the dis-ease within you, and continue doing that. Don't stop. Go to those dark places and see what comes up, even though it's scary, and start to turn it around. Reframe that thinking and that mind. Utilize your support system. We are all here to support each other. We're not meant to be alone or isolated, maybe for brief periods of time, but not in isolation. So we have like the blue zone studies that talk about that. There's a lot of science to back those things. Grounding is really, really important. That's how we heal. Look up Clint Ober and earthing. We interviewed him on the show. In fact, some of his products are on our website. We partner with them, but it's free. You can just go outside and stick your feet on the grass. And by doing that, your body's no longer inflamed. Mm-hmm. So doing that 20 minutes a day can really help make a difference, huge difference.
Yeah. The tree huggers, the hippies had something right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going back into your philosophies and how do you mix that with your personal life, your and future endeavors with Driven Life or Driven Livin,
Oh,
sorry.
how does it intermix with my personal life?
Mm.
Everything I do, everything, you it's like living what you preach, right? It shows up in all areas. And am I perfect in everything? Absolutely not. In fact, my business has come first in a lot of regards, to whereas I was not paying attention or doing enough physically for physical well-being and health. And so I make sure that I get outside for a walk for 40 minutes every single day, to help maintain that, because otherwise it's a lot of time creating and on the computer, because everything is virtual that I do. Everything that I create is all here. And so but it does, especially we have a community that's called Route 66, and it's 3 times a year. We do 66 days of certain habits. So we have a habit checklist, and I do those every single day consistently. And I don't have to think about it, because it's so, it's just so, I just automatic. I do it all the time. So yeah, it all really has an interplay of everything that I do. And there's so many things and so much magical, miraculous things that I've seen, and through all of the guests that I've had on the show and the things that they have shared and seen, and the science, and that why wouldn't I want to share that with the world?
Yeah. So beautiful how you integrate all these different things into your life, and you have different challenges, it seems like, that you do, not only with yourself, but with others. You're keeping that community. And with people that want to start changing their lives, this is not just for people that have autoimmune. This can go for people who have autoimmune, obviously. What's one piece of advice? Like, where do they start? What would you,
Hmm.
what would you tell them?
I would say start early, because when we start creating habits right off the bat, early in the morning, then we don't allow the day to overrun everything else. And how we start a day impacts the rest of the day. So when you take control of the day, you have control of the day, if that makes sense. So I would say that, there's so many things you could do, right? But start in the beginning, whatever new habit that you want to start venturing into. And I could list off many things, but meditation is always going to be at the top. Going within, connecting with yourself, healing each energy center, really listening to your body to find out what you need to tune in, what you need to put your intention and concentration on, and start giving it loving energy. The Heart Math Institute, you can research them, and they can show you how much energy that we are, all of the frequencies of emotion that are coming off of that and emanating off of us continuously. But being really intentional on those healing points. If there's something that is ailing you at the moment, start putting loving energy towards that, putting loving energy towards yourself, and start in the morning so you don't forget it. And then you'll feel really good about your day, because you're like, yeah, I did it. I can check it off. And for me, it's always been very, very important for me to document and to have things written down, because I can see my progress. So tracking is really important for me. I like to see what I've done, because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel empowered, accomplished, all of those things. So maybe just like find somewhere where you can, write it down. Be like, I meditated for, if you're not used to it, set your timer for 5 minutes, set your timer for 10 minutes, and just sit with yourself. Guided meditations are very helpful. I'm on Insight Timer. If you want to listen to my guided meditations, April Chavez, just look me up. I love doing guided meditations. It brings me great joy. And I think it's because I read to my girls before bed their whole life growing up. And of course, going into hypnotherapy, like all of those pieces really are just having that lovely voice to ease you, comfort you, calm you, and lead you into a whole nother.
So beautiful. I could talk to you forever, but I want to mind your time. Um,
Thank you.
Anything you want to talk about your business, future endeavors with Driven Livin that you want to tell the audience?
Gosh, come check out our community. The Drive Collective is free, it's open, it's private. It's a place where you get to be with like-minded people who are driven just like you to improve themselves. And there's a lot of, we're constantly giving tips, tricks, and supporting one another. So I welcome you to our community, the Drive Collective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, April, for your time.
Thank you, Desiree. It has been an honor to be on your platform. Thank you for having me.
Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.